Committee will be in order. I want to welcome everyone to this markup of the 2019 Appropriations Bill for Department of State, Foreign Operations, and related programs. First, I want to thank Chairman Frelinghuysen for another year of his tireless work and commitment to move these bills through sub and full committee. The completion of our mark this morning here will mean 10 of the 12 fiscal year 2019 bills will be through subcommittee. So I want to congratulate the chairman on a job well done. And also his support for this bill, the diplomacy and development mission sustained in the bill. The allocation was very good, and we appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. It allows the subcommittee to responsibly provide the resources to support U.S. foreign policy and security interests around the globe. I also want to thank Ms. Lowy for her work on this subcommittee, and particularly on this bill. She cares deeply about the programs funded in the bill. Despite our differences on some issues, we have many common priorities that advance our country's national security and economic interests. It's been a true pleasure to continue the strong partnership that we have developed over the years, actually fostered during my tenure as full chair through our work in this setting, and I want to thank her for her friendship and her support for worthy causes. I would also be remiss if I neglected to note that as a whole, our subcommittee has a great group of members. Our hearings and meetings are well attended, and I appreciate the interest and the knowledge from members on both sides of the aisle on the programs that fall under our jurisdiction. So I want to thank each of you for your contributions to this bill. Before summarizing the recommendation that is before you, I want to welcome our newest member, Mr. Rutherford of Florida, a former sheriff in Jacksonville. What's really remarkable about this gentleman is he has close roots to Kentucky. His dad, I think it was from Harlan County, is that correct? Yeah, Bloody Harlan, they call it. So he comes highly recommended. We worked together on the Stop School Violence Act, which he authored a few weeks ago. We passed into law earlier in the year. So I know he's an engaged, thoughtful, and hard-working member. So we're delighted to have you on the committee and especially on this subcommittee, Mr. Rutherford. Certainly the importance of diplomacy in world affairs has come to the forefront this week as President Trump has undertaken historic efforts in Singapore to build a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. We're all hopeful that the President's conversations with the North Korean leadership will bear fruit and lead to both prosperity for the people of that region and security for the U.S. and her allies. This 2019 State and Foreign Operations bill before you today totals $54 billion. This is the same as the fiscal 2018 enacted level and $11.8 billion above the President's request. The legislation supports the continued investment in our diplomatic and development capacity across the globe, which are core components of our nation's security framework. Together with our unmatched armed forces, the dedicated public servants at the State Department and USAID help the United States lead by example and build a foundation for peace and security in every corner of the world. It does so by first providing over $6 billion for embassy security. This funding will allow the State Department to address the security needs of personnel serving at more than 275 U.S. diplomatic facilities overseas, and is in line with the recommendations of the Benghazi Accountability Review Board. Second, the bill recommends $9.3 billion for security assistance, including $3.3 billion of foreign military financing for Israel, which is an increase of $200 million over last year. Additionally, the bill maintains support for key partners like Egypt and Jordan to support stability in the region, Ukraine, Georgia, and other countries facing Russian aggression, and Colombia, Central America, and Mexico to help counter transnational criminal organizations and stem the flow of drugs into the United States. Third, the bill upholds American values. The bill increases funds to $2.4 billion funding to promote democracy around the world. It includes $7.6 billion for humanitarian assistance and $8.7 billion for global health programs, including $845 million for maternal and child health programs. Fourth, the bill supports the President's initiative to stop opioid abuse and reduce drug supply and demand by increasing assistance to countries in our hemisphere to stop the flow of opioid into the United States, and it fully funds the President's request to combat transnational criminal organizations. As you all have heard me discuss this for years, as with you, this opioid epidemic is perhaps the leading domestic crisis of our time, called by the CDC an epidemic, and by the President a disaster. As our challenge has shifted from prescription painkillers to illicit synthetic opioids, we must engage with our partners on the international stage to stop the flow of heroin and fentanyl through our borders and into our communities. This is a life or death situation. There's no doubt about that. And I'm proud that this bill takes important steps to stem the tide of addiction and overdose deaths. We're beginning to see now for the first time an actual reduction in the prescription pain abuse deaths. And while we're seeing that shift from legitimate prescription pills, we're now seeing illicit, illegal heroin taking the place of those pills. The big problem is the heroin is being laced with fentanyl, which is an absolutely incredible killer, and the user who's using heroin that's laced with fentanyl has no idea how much fentanyl is in the mix, and many times fatal, unknown to the user. A whole new problem that we're facing now with the fight against this scourge. Fifth, this bill prioritizes funding for global health security, which enables developing countries to be better prepared to prevent, detect, and respond to dangerous infectious disease outbreaks that could have a direct impact on the health of Americans. And lastly, the bill focuses on making our government more accountable to Congress and the American people by strengthening oversight, improving management, and eliminating redundant programs. Before I turn to Ms. Lowy, let me say a word of appreciation on your behalf and mine to the staff, this is one of the best staffs in the business, and we're delighted to have them all doing the work they're doing. And it is great, productive work. So to Craig and all of the staff, we say thank you on both sides of the aisle for the great work that you've done. For the majority staff, I want to thank the clerk, Craig Higgins, and his team, Susan Adams, Celia Alvarado, David Bortnick, Winnie Chang, and Dean Caloris. And from my personal office, I want to thank Megan Bell and Alex Penson. From the minority staff, we want to thank Steve Marquez, Aaron Kolojaski, Matt Washington, and Elizabeth Leibowitz. Thank each of you for the great work that you've done on this bill. We appreciate all of your help. Now let me turn to our ranking member, Ms. Loy, for her opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Chairman Rogers, and I appreciate all your kind words. It's been a real pleasure for me to work with you. And, of course, I can't resist Ms. Granger because we worked together for quite a few years as well, and our full committee chairman, Mr. Frelinghuysen. And I do want to say that I appreciate the majority's efforts to include many of my colleagues' priorities in this bill, and I also want to welcome Mr. Rutherford, our newest member. This is a very special committee, and so I know that your experience will be rewarded, and we look forward to working with you. Welcome. And I want to express my appreciation to the majority staff, Craig Higgins, Susan Adams, Clelia Alvarado, David Bortnick, Winnie Chang, Dean Caloris, Megan O'Donnell, and Alex Pinson, as well as my staff. Note the difference in numbers between the majority and the minority. Steve Marquez, Aaron Kolojaski, Matt Washington, Liz Leibowitz, and Monica Pons, but we really appreciate both staffs, and I know how well you all work together. And as we thank each other, and while I truly appreciate the process, I must say that I am disappointed in the allocation in several policy provisions. It's true that the bill before us avoids the administration's irresponsible FY 2019 proposal to cut our diplomatic and development efforts. However, we should be doing more at a time of unparalleled refugee emergencies, numerous countries on the brink of famine, and ongoing threats to U.S. national security. With an $18 billion increase in discretionary spending for FY 2019, we could and should be investing more than 1% of the budget on our overseas efforts. The House allocation for this bill is the same as FY 2018, but should be at least equal to the Senate's increase of $400 million to recognize that we cannot further risk U.S. leadership abroad by shortchanging foreign aid and diplomacy. We would be more secure and garner more goodwill if instead of the Republican plan to waste hundreds of millions of dollars on Trump's border wall and deportation force, we increased our investments in diplomacy and other security assistance in this bill. This bill maintains unwavering bipartisan support and robust funding, in accordance with the new MOU for our close ally Israel, and provides funding for other critical partners such as Jordan, and for development goals in many of the world's poorest countries. Further, this bill contains funding for the international organizations and programs account, recognizing that U.S. support for UN agencies gives taxpayers the best return on investment. Unfortunately, this bill contains a number of short-sighted poison pills that would make the world less safe, hurt the most vulnerable, and reduce the effectiveness of U.S. development. With the increasing number of natural disasters around the world, I had hoped my Republican friends would follow the scientific community on climate change. Sadly, this bill denies reality and would ban U.S. contributions to the Green Climate Fund and continue to be silent on the impact of climate change on poverty and conflict. While this administration may be comfortable dismantling U.S. leadership on climate change, this strategy, in my judgment, is reckless and short-sighted. In 2018, I find it really hard to believe that we're still arguing over the importance of international family planning and reproductive health programs. Study after study has shown that access to modern contraceptives not only prevents unwanted pregnancies, prevents abortion and maternal deaths, it is also key to gender equality and economic growth. But the mark would slash investments in bilateral family planning, codify the global gag rule, and its expansion into all global health, and prohibit U.S. contributions to UNFPA. Regarding the global gag rule and its expansions into all global health, I just want to say to my colleagues, because I can't resist at this point, if a woman with 8 children, and I remember in Cambodia seeing this woman walking, even though we were there and we saw Angkor Wat, to see these women walking with 8 children and knowing that she was pregnant with her 9th, knowing that she can't get assistance, she can't get advice, really is so, so tragic. What happens that these policies really hurt vulnerable women and severely decrease the efficiency of U.S. aid programs. So to go to a clinic when this woman was 8 months pregnant, can't get any advice for the future, I think is so tragic. I've always tried to keep contentious issues out of this bill, but these riders, in my judgment, are poison pills we cannot accept, and in the end, Democratic votes will be needed to pass this bill. If the Republican leadership decides this bill must proceed with these riders, I will have to object, offer amendments in full committee to strike them, and regrettably, in the end, oppose passage. In the FY 2018 omnibus, Congress rejected the President's ill-advised international budget by supporting robust investments in development and diplomacy, and rejected the dangerous riders before us today. As it stands, this bill would force the U.S. to retreat from its global leadership, and most members in this room know this role would be filled by those who frankly do not share our views or our ideals. Democrats cannot support a bill if it would mean turning our back to the world's most vulnerable women or the looming threat of climate change. But again, I want to thank the chair. We can agree to disagree pleasantly, and look forward to working with my colleagues to improve this bill. I intend to withhold offering any amendments today, but will offer what I hope will be bipartisan changes at full committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentlelady. Let me now recognize our full committee chairman, Mr. Frelinghuysen, for any remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Departing from a very well-written script which my staff provided me, let me say I'm so pleased to see you both joined at the hip again. You did a wonderful job as my predecessor, and of course, Ms. Lowy has been a constant on this committee for longer than I can remember, and obviously does a wonderful job working with me on getting all the appropriations bills through the process. We may disagree on things, but I think we're enormously proud of doing our level best to restore regular order. Many years ago, when I first got to Congress, they put me on the D.C. committee sort of to serve penance, and then they put me on the Foreign Operations Committee. And I have always had a fascination and interest in the work of the Foreign Operations Subcommittee. At one point, Sonny Callahan from Alabama was the chairman of the committee, and for those of you who have been around here, and I see a few people nodding, he never voted for a bill, and he had to, of course, get the bill through Congress. But both of you have done an incredible job. You are individually, with all of your members, devoted to the part of the federal budget which is so important. We're all supportive of a strong national defense, but this is the sort of soft power we need. And without being too dramatic about it, I can't imagine, as the chairman said, a more important or critical time for the type of investments this bill makes. We may disagree about amounts and riders, but boy, there has been for some time now, I think, a vacuum. And I think our new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is filling that vacuum in a very positive way. I think there's far more respect for our diplomatic corps, our foreign service, men and women who today on assignment have far more difficult assignment. Not only do they have the assignment of working on our behalf, but they have to worry about their own protection. And may I thank you, both of you, for recognizing it's more than just standoffs of embassies. The work that these men and women do is incredibly important. So I view this bill as a first step to rebuilding our relationships with our friends and allies. And I think it's another step forward, quite honestly, I'll be quite blunt, in rebuilding the morale of the men and women who do remarkable things each and every day for us. And their counterparts, of course, do that in the military every day. And both the military and our diplomats work together to make for a more peaceful and better world. And I'm so pleased to support this bill. It may have certain inadequacies, but I know both of you are devoted to making sure that our end product, with the great work of Craig and his staff, is something we can all be proud of. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to echo and re-say what you have already said about the staff at the State Department. These are hardworking, dedicated, patriotic people, and they need assurance from us and the American people of the work that they're doing. And we hope that this bill says very loudly what you have allowed us to say with your allocation, and that is these dollars we spend on this the soft power of the U.S. is critical. And together with the hard power of the military, this is a great team. And so thank you for those words and the allocation. Speaking of Chairman Callahan, he would write this bill and then would vote against it.
I didn't say that one.
But that was, he did not like that chore, but he did it necessarily. Does anyone else wish to say, Mr. Fortenberry?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership, and I'm going to say something that perhaps you cannot say yourself. You went on for a significant amount of time in a very learned manner speaking about the depth of the opioid crisis. Before most people had ever heard the word opioid, you were out front on this issue. You understand it. You see the scourge of it hitting our country. You were prescient in your early analysis of this. So I just wanted to commend you because I think we all forget where certain things came from. But this movement to try to thoughtfully address this with the right types of public policy really had its origins in your leadership. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Since you mentioned that, let me mention this. An organization called Unite, which we put together in my district 15, 16 years ago, because the opioid problem hit there first, my district. That organization had a three-pronged attack, which is now being mimicked nationally and internationally, thank goodness. Investigations, treatment, education, unlawful narcotics, Unite. We just finished the 7th annual summit in Atlanta that Unite puts on for the world. We had 4,000 people there from all the states in 9 different countries. And that's why, another reason why this bill is important, because it takes that message overseas. But the head of NIH, CDC, DEA, FDA, the drug czar, senators, House members, governors, and Bill Clinton spoke this time, as did Kelly and Conway. The last one, the 6th annual, President Obama came and spoke. So it is it is now the platform under one roof where all the disciplines fighting this problem are represented. Law enforcement, legal, educational, congressional, people who treat, and on and on and on. It's the only place where all that is in one place, and they learn from each other. And I would encourage each of you to attend the next summit in April. I think you'll find it uplifting and very informative and useful. Thanks for the platform to speak from. Anyone else wish to be heard? If not, are there amendments to the bill? If not, I recognize Ms. Granger for a motion.
Thank you. I move the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
All in favor of reporting the bill to the full committee will say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. And the motion is agreed to. Thank you for great work. We'll see you in full committee and the floor. Hold on. What? One more.
Always a pleasure.
Members are reminded that the bill and the report must stay in this room. They'll be circulated 3 days before full committee markup. And I ask unanimous consent that the staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report, and without objection, that is so ordered.
So be it.
Committee stands adjourned.